On this grey and wet morning, I've come down to South Lanarkshire to a raptor persecution hotspot to tell you a very, very miserable story.
We got a phone call that this Hen Harrier was coming in, which is unusual because we don't get many of them alive. He came in a little container and he was unable to stand, and as soon as we took him out it was quite obvious that he'd broken his leg.
Back in the spring, a couple of raptor study group workers were out on the moors here and they saw something unusual in the distance, flapping around on the ground.
I received a call from a raptor worker who was monitoring hen harriers in that area. He saw a bird that he thought may have been injured, and there was no suspicion that there was any criminality at that stage. I instructed him to go on and have a look for the bird and look for any injury on the bird and see if it could fly. He then phoned me to say that he had found the bird. The bird was in a spring trap, it had injuries to its leg. So I instructed him to remove the bird, to remove the trap. My first concern was the welfare of the bird, and the crime would come second.
And look, here is the trap once they'd removed the bird, and you can see it's all blood spattered. But you know what? The story gets worse. Because just a few metres away was this. This is the nest of a hen harrier. You can see a couple of eggs there. But look, hidden under the moss in the nest is another set spring trap. There was no sign of the female.
This hen harrier was discovered near Leadhills in Scotland, specifically in an area of Grouse Moor that's notorious for wildlife crime.
This area is one of the worst areas in Scotland for raptor persecution, really going back 20 years. The catalogue of offences here is truly eye-watering. This is a map of the area here, and all the red dots on this map are a confirmed raptor persecution offence: poisonings, shootings, trappings, nest destructions. This latest hen harrier caught in a spring trap that was viciously deployed on a nest was up here.
It had been caught just above the foot. It was just hanging on by these tendons, a tiny strip of...
So the bone was completely shattered?
Yeah, and it was sticking out, and so I was about to put him down, and then I thought, well, we'd try and we'd see how he did the first 24 hours.
We tend to focus on raptor persecution when it's, it comes to the problems of grouse moors, but it's far broader than that, isn't it?
It is. You know, when I first came to Scotland over 5 years ago, I thought that's what Scotland looked like. And over the last 5 years, I've begun to appreciate that that's just a manufactured environment. There's a circle of destruction that surrounds grouse moors. What they want is to have as many grouse as possible so that they can kill as many grouse as possible. And to make sure that you have as many grouse as possible, you get rid of any animal that threatens the grouse. So clearly, illegal raptor persecution is a part of that. But there are traps and snares all over these moors which are aiming at foxes, stoats and weasels, because guess what? They threaten the grouse.
We even spotted a trap as we were driving along a road in this area. Fortunately, this one was empty.
So what you've got in these sorts of places and driven grouse moors right across Scotland is these rail traps, or massive spring traps, that are set perfectly legally at the moment across the burns, the rivers and the streams. And they're there purely and simply to catch stoats and weasels. And I'm afraid lots of other animals and birds get caught in those non-target species.
I mean, we see red squirrels, we see ring ouzels, we've even seen merlins in these traps. There's no guarantee as to what they're going to kill, is there?
Correct. So you've got a massive mouse trap on a log across a stream. That's the way that animals want to cross these water courses. But I don't think these things should be out here in our countryside in this day and age. They're incredibly cruel and very unspecific.
This is a spring trap working in slow motion.
If you, say, had a tractor go over your leg, which is probably the equivalent kind of force for a bird this small, you can probably then empathise with what it would feel like. These bones were, completely sticking out but then you imagine that the bird's flapping on there trying to pull this smashed leg away, and it's just been held by these tendons and the bone banging against the end of that. You know, they're not exactly the same as us, but I think that that kind of pain and distress would be very, very easy to, you know, to understand to anyone.
And of course, what we're looking at here is the extermination of all of the predators in this environment, which completely upsets the ecology of that environment. Obviously, it can't be functional without those animals playing their role.
Correct, and I think there is, there is probably a provision for people to kill things in certain circumstances, but we're talking it's way off the scale here. This is all about driven grouse shooting grouse for fun, and that's the only reason why our predators, our natural history, our wildlife is being killed in these areas.
We made a little construct of pins, and literally as soon as he woke up for anaesthesia, he was able to stand and use his toes, and within a couple of days he started to use his feet to eat, so we thought, fantastic. And we knew there might be a problem keeping the blood supply going, and that would go wrong in the first few days, but it didn't.
The likelihood is, Ian, that a small number of individuals are killing huge numbers of raptors, and that this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, very much so. We have an industry and those employed by it who are clearly having a disproportionate impact on some of the most iconic of Scotland's species, our birds of prey.
It seems clear that something has to change.
It's quite astonishing, really, that they continue to get away with it. I really don't understand. Donald Dewar, who was the founding father of devolution, identified wildlife crime as a stain in the conscience of the nation. And 20 years later, this is still happening. So I certainly sincerely hope it will be a turning point. I'll do as much as I can to make sure we make it into that turning point. But ultimately, we need political leadership from the very top of the Scottish Government, and that means the First Minister.
There are lots of people who are campaigning for change.
What the Revive Coalition would like to see is the government investing in the moors and bringing different ways. There's no one silver bullet to the way you do it. There is a mosaic approach that needs to be done across a number of ways about how you could bring life back to the grouse moors and bring communities back to the grouse moors, and to establish a normal way of life and not depend on the killing of hundreds of thousands of birds for entertainment.
These practices have got to change.
When you came to post, were you surprised by the level of this crime?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big shock to me, the level of raptor persecution and the clear links to industry. And the solutions are within that industry. We need to work together to fix it, but the crime for me is of a level that I never expected it to be.
Tell me a bit about Operation Owl.
So it's a national campaign looking to raise awareness within the community around what to look out for, the signs to look out for in respect of raptor persecution, looking at shooting, trapping, poisoning offences, just asking the public to be our eyes and ears in tackling this ongoing issue.
And how's it going? It's been running for a little while.
Yeah, so the website's now live, and that's been really well received, lots of useful information on there, and the public are coming forward in their droves, to be fair, with information that we're able to work together with the National Wildlife Crime Unit and wildlife crime officers across the country to start to investigate offences.
This is one of many areas that has just continued, despite the actions of RSPB, of Raptor Study Group workers, of police, of government, to tackle raptor persecution. It continues. They are sticking two fingers up at us. They are laughing at us. Something needs to change, and it needs to be drastic, and it needs to be soon.
And about 10 days in, unfortunately, I think the bone had just been too badly damaged, and despite all the bandaging that we'd had around it, which is now not on, and the pins, the bone started to die back, and then the blood supply couldn't cope, and then his toes started to die off. And then, that was the end, so I had to put him down. There's nothing that can ever be humane about that, and it's just a horrid way to go, unfortunately.
20 years ago, when the Scottish Parliament was formed, Donald Dewar described raptor persecution as a national disgrace and said that that government would do everything that it could to eradicate it. Well, that disgrace is still here, and that's a disgrace.